Hi, this is Lawrence from financialthing.com, and I'm here today with Mike Bristow. He is with CrowdProperty. He is the CEO, and we're here in London. We're doing a little fact finding for you out there to give some information about what CrowdProperty does. And thank you, Mike, for spending the time with us today to give our readers the information. How are you today?
Pleasure. Very good, Lawrence. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. And we're going to ask a couple of basic questions. Tell me about when CrowdProperty was launched.
Sure. In 2013, the three co-founders came together. We've been investing and developing in property for decades between us, and we found ourselves personally that funding in that market was broken. So that's when we set out saying we're going to build an amazing lending business that really caters for that market. And then we looked in terms of sources of capital, peer-to-peer lending model, but we started first and foremost asset experts. We then developed the peer-to-peer lending model, and we have a complementary source of capital now across peer-to-peer and institutions.
And when was your first launch peer-to-peer loan?
In 2014.
Can you just tell people briefly what the type of products that CrowdProperty offers to lenders?
Sure. So we lend against property projects. So UK-based residential property projects where there is a principal in that project that is adding value to UK residential property. And so that's what we've opened up for retail lenders to participate in. We very carefully curate those projects, and we'll talk about some of the stats later. But lenders can participate in two ways. Firstly, a self-select model where a lender can go onto the platform when we launch projects and say, I like that, I don't want to participate in that one, and et cetera, et cetera. But very much sort of self-select, and we think that's important because people like to engage in residential real estate. Everyone has a view. And then we found our projects actually funding very, very quickly, in minutes, if not seconds, on our platform. And some people wanted to participate on all the projects because they backed us as a business and our expertise. So that's why we introduced Auto Invest, and now people can more easily diversify across every project. And we think diversification is a good thing for retail lenders to be doing.
And so the types of loans that you're offering through CrowdProperty are development and bridging, or?
It's the spectrum from new build development through heavy refurb, light refurb, extensions, conversions. There's bridging product, there's also auction purchases. Typically the way we describe that is anything that's getting a property professional through the project bit, through the value add bit, and then they might either sell or they might refinance and keep and yield. And we're seeing that a lot of that in the market, that developers now want to keep the projects that they're doing.
What type of return rates can lenders expect to target through CrowdProperty?
So when money is deployed in those loans, lenders will receive between 7 and 8%. And obviously the crucial thing, that's the return bit. So the risk bit, we mitigate that with first charge security only. So in the capital stack of property, which can be quite complex, we are in first charge secured debt. That means that we both have the top of the hierarchy in terms of recovery, but we also control that recovery as well. And we believe that to be a very important place in the capital stack to be.
And are the rates that you target for lenders the same on manual and auto invest, or they differ?
Yeah, they're exactly the same. And we think that's important. It's when capital is in the loan, that is what the lender receives.
I looked on your website, Mike. You have a thing called the CrowdProperty Shield. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. We came up with the Shield, and that sort of really encapsulates sort of the key elements to risk management in our business. And first and foremost, we have unparalleled expertise across the three co-founders. We have 75 years of experience in property investment and development, and we've built a team of property experts because we are a property lender. That's first and foremost. Crucially, we've all been there developing property ourselves, investing and developing property ourselves. We know what the risks are when you put a spade in the ground. So that's the expertise bit. Asset class expertise is paramount in any lending environment. So that's firstly. Secondly, rigorous due diligence. We take that expertise, we've refined and refined over 5 years of lending. We've got better and better, tighter and tighter criteria. We've only ever tightened our criteria. We've seen £1.5 billion worth of applications. We've funded about 3% of that. We're quite tough at getting projects approved. But we're building this business for a very long-term business, and we feel that responsible lending and prudent lending is how we build that long-term business. But we're still building the data set around the market and around projects in the market that gives us real power in terms of getting better and better at that. And then the final element of the CrowdProperty Shield is first charge security, as I mentioned. So senior in the capital stack, control recovery. That is the place that we are very comfortable being.
Yeah, I know you and I had talked about second charges versus first charges and how essential having a first charge over a asset is, especially with what you're doing.
And it comes, that control bit is can be under appreciated. That we drive that recovery process on behalf of our lenders.
And what is the minimum investment amount that a lender would have to make to get involved in one of these loans?
Sure. So on a self-select, so firstly it's the same whether it's a standard investment or an ISA investment or a pension investment. So in self-select, the minimum amount in an individual loan is £500. In auto invest, it's also £500, but you can set that £500 to be spread up to 10 projects. So our minimum actual entry under the Auto Invest product is £50. And we introduced that to help people diversify.
Just to clarify, that somebody could put £50 into each product, but a minimum of 500.
Minimum of 500 in one project through self-select, but minimum £500 into auto invest that they can set to spread across 10.
Do you offer any type of secondary market if people decide they need to exit for some reason?
So we don't have a secondary market, and there are a few reasons around that. Firstly, we do a lot of research both on the lender side and the borrower side, and actually that came out quite low in the priorities. So introducing things like pledge limits for an interim period and auto invest and some of the other lender side pieces that we have introduced, our lenders have asked for those first. Secondly, our average loan is 14 months. Again, part of that research says that that's actually how a typical term of people, how they think about money and their allocation of money if they're planning to buy a car or similar. It's not business lending at 3 to 5 years on average. And then thirdly, there's all the complexities of pricing, availability, potential danger of giving the impression of a secondary market liquidity where that liquidity may not be there. So secondary market is a very easy thing to offer, but to get right is very complex and can be misleading and dangerous. So we don't have that at the moment. I'm not saying we wouldn't have that, but if we entered into that, we would go about that in the rigorous and proper way that we do everything else.
Now, one of the most important things in peer-to-peer lending at the moment is risk evaluation, which you and I have discussed about spreads and how that transparency is sometimes missed through companies. I know you're very transparent with the spreads that you charge to borrowers versus the amount of interest that a lender is targeted to be paid. Can you explain your views sort of on the spread and explain how CrowdProperty works on the spreads?
Sure. So first and foremost, we think transparency across data is and experience and all of these aspects about a business model is very, very important. If as a lender you don't have your questions answered, I would be wary. So our statistics page is recognised as one of the leading in the market, and on that we demonstrate that our spread, the difference between the borrower rate and the lender rate is 2%, 2 percentage points, and there are very few players in the market that are totally transparent about that like we are. It's a number that's crucial to understand. There's a fundamental difference if you're as a lender getting 8% under two scenarios, where the borrower's paying 10% or the borrower's paying 15%. because that's the indication of risk in a fairly effective market on the borrower side, especially in property. So if someone's borrowing at 15 and you're getting 8, that's warning signs, and that's why that number, that single number, is so crucial to know in your lending activity.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've seen recently is the default levels have been rising on some of these property development loan companies, and as the loan books mature over time, the defaults have risen. How is CrowdProperty positioned to handle defaults? Have you actually had to go through the default recovery process yet, and how has that process been for CrowdProperty?
So first and foremost, the sector has to learn from data, has to get sharper and sharper and sharper. And over, as I say, 5 years of lending, we've only ever tightened our criteria based on learnings that we've got out of our own book. Okay, that builds us into a better lender. We're not chasing growth; we're lending well. It's a very, very different attitude. Secondly, as clearly outlined on our statistics page as well, we've had 3 loans in our history that have gone late longer than 180 days, which is the FCA definition of technical default. One of those 3 loans, we went through full repossession and exit, and in all of those examples, we recovered all lender capital and all lender accrued interest, including the late interest. In full, we have a 100% perfect capital and interest payback track record. Now that's historical performance, obviously, and we know that historical performance is not necessarily the indicator of future performance, but it does say a lot about the systems, the processes, and the attitudes of those people in that business, and the ability for us to recover those funds should anything go wrong. So we know how to do that. We've done it, and we've done it perfectly.